So I saw Moana 2 this past Saturday at the theaters, and I know I'm late on this movie because it came out the end of last month. But I love the first Moana movie, so I was really excited for the sequel. And I thought this was an enjoyable enough, safe sequel. Like it does nothing that's like egregiously bad, but it also doesn't do anything that really stands out. Like the biggest positive I would say about this movie is that the animation looks great, and there's some other positives I have where I think the voice cast all do a great job. I enjoyed going back to this world. I enjoyed seeing these characters again. I think the main actress who plays Moana, who voices Moana, I think she's still great in this movie as a character. I still love the character. And I think the Walk is still great as Moana in this. I think that's the name of his character. So the voice acting, great. And animation wise, it looks beautiful. The animation in this movie, so like visually gorgeous movie. And I think the third act is really good. I think like for me, the third act is the best part of the movie, and it does set up an interesting direction to go in the third movie. Where I'm like, okay, you know what? I didn't love this movie. I think it's a step down, but it does end strong. Where I'm like, okay, this could be interesting where they take the story this. But everything else is kind of like in the middle for me. Where I'm like, the songs I think are fine in this movie. They're just kind of forgettable. They aren't bad, but they don't stand out either. Like the first Moana movie to me had just great songs that really emotionally hit you. They were casty, they were memorable. The songs in this one is kind of like, okay, they're fine. Like they aren't songs I'm going to be like listening to constantly like I do with the first Moana movie. They aren't the most memorable, but they aren't like terrible either. It's just a very like okay songs. So none of the songs really stood out to me. Like the best music parts of this movie when it was is when you were hearing music from that was from the first movie. The new songs was all kind of like, yeah, that was fine, not terrible, but not memorable either. And the first two acts of this movie, I did find the first two acts of the movie just to be kind of just okay. Like it was like the plot took a little bit long to get going for me personally. And the Wasp character, he doesn't really like you see him at the beginning, but him and Moana don't get together until later on, and one of the things I think this movie would have been better if you just had him and the Wasp. If you had Ho, if you had the character Moana and the Wasp character just meet up early in the movie and just had events with just those two characters, I think that personally for me that would have been interesting because I think I still have good chemistry to two characters when it comes to I really enjoy their friendship. Like maybe not as like quite as good as the first movie, the chemistry, but I still think there's good chemistry where I really enjoyed the friendship between those two characters. Another I would say another negative with this movie is that it kind of felt like it went the more kiddie route with this, where the humor in this movie is at times just a little too kid humor for me. Where I think the first movie to me just felt like it did a great job of being one of those anime movies that adults can love and kids can love. I felt like the humor in this one went more towards for kids where there's some parts in this movie I was like, this is a little goofy for me. Like I can see maybe some kids find some parts of this movie funny, the humor in this movie, but there was also I felt like the humor in this movie one and two was like kind of a step down. Like you had humor in the first movie, but this the sequel just felt like it went towards more like humor for kids. Another thing I felt met on in this movie is that Moana, like you meet three new characters, like an old guy, a farmer, this girl that likes to like fish stuff, and this guy who's a big fan of the Lox character, Maui, like a fanboy, and I felt like these three characters that joins Moana, which is why I feel like it would have been better to have Moana and the Lox character just have the best with just those two characters in this movie because the three new characters that become part of Moana's crew in this, they're just there for comedic relief. Like they don't really have a personality beyond this, each of them having one trait that defines them. Like none of them get really any story arcs. They're just kind of there to be comedic relief, but they don't really add anything. Like if you take those three out, these three characters, the old guy, the farmer, this guy who's a fanboy of the Wax character, and this girl who likes to fish stuff. If you take out these three new characters that want to recruit it for a crew, it wouldn't affect the movie for me personally. Like I feel like they just didn't really like they don't. they weren't bad. Like I didn't hate the characters, but they didn't really add anything to the movie either. They were just kind of there to be comic relief, and just they all have, like I said, just a trait about them. They don't really go beyond the one trait with these characters. So they were just kind of forgettable characters to me. And I know this was originally going to be, I believe, a TV show on Disney Plus, and I think that's one of the issues I kind of have with the first two acts. This feels like they strung like a bunch of episodes together to make it a movie, where they can have where they put a whole bunch of episodes together, and they try to combine episodes of a bunch of episodes, like a whole bunch of episodes with a whole bunch of plots together, and make it into a movie. And look, they did a decent job with that, but I can feel it in the movie. Like I can feel like, okay, maybe like those three characters, maybe they would have gotten more development in a Disney Plus show where you could spend more time with these three new characters. And just the way the movie is kind of structured in the first two acts of this movie, it felt like a TV show. Like you took the plot of a TV show and combined episodes together. So I did feel that in this movie. I did feel that personally. Like it felt like, yeah, this was originally a TV show, and they like they took all the episodes and tried to make a plot for a movie. And like I said, it's a little slow for the first two acts for me personally. Like it ends strong. It starts out okay in the first two acts, but it just like it never feels like the story is as big as epic as it could be with the first two acts, and it just feels like it's taking too long to get to the plot. So it's a movie that I think is just a very safe, enjoyable enough movie. Like it does nothing really extremely bad in my opinion. Like even the negatives are more kind of like this. I'm just kind of like, okay, that was fine, but it just didn't do anything particularly to stand out. When it comes to the story, I think when it comes to the songs too, it's a very safe, enjoyable enough sequel. And it just kind of I was disappointed in it. Where I felt like the first one is just so great. It's just isn't one of those sequels I'm going to go back and rewatch again. I am still excited for Moana 3. I think the way this movie ends, because this isn't about this movie. Like I said, it ends strongly. Like I think the third act is actually emotional. I was like, okay, this is really good. This third act. If the rest of the movie had the same pace and energy of that third act of this movie, I think it could have been a great sequel. So even though I came out of this movie just feeling kind of like that was an enjoyable, safe enough sequel, I'm still excited for Moana 3 because of the way it ends. There is a mid-credit scene for this movie, but the very end of this movie does set up like an interesting dress in story wise for the Moana character and where they could go. So I am excited for Moana 3. But this is definitely one of those middle chapters where I'm like, yeah, enjoyable enough, but doesn't do anything particularly extremely bad, doesn't do anything particularly that makes it stand out either. So I would say Moana 2 is worth checking out if you're looking for a safe, enjoyable sequel, but it's not as memorable as that first movie in my opinion. So that's my thoughts on Moana 2. Until next time, movie fans.